Thank you everyone for joining us here this morning. I just want to start off saying this is one of my favorite events that we do because it's a chance where we get to highlight the good things going on in government, the bold thinkers, for them. And as I walking out this morning and it's cold and it's windy and I'm tired and still got a little bit of the itis left over from Thanksgiving, but you get at the end of the year, and it just kind of been a long year for everyone, I'm sure. So it's nice to be able to, at this time of year, look back and see what people are doing and realize that the work everyone's doing in government does make a difference. That even when it feels like your wheels are spinning, you're still kicking up dirt and eventually you're gonna be moving forward. So we've got a great panel of people here who are doing exactly that. And what I'd like to do is start off by just having them each explain a little bit about who they are and some of the work that them and their teams are doing to push the envelope. Then I wanna switch gears and, because we've had all these presentations where people are talking about what they're doing, I want to give you all a chance to hear about how it's done and to ask questions about how it's done. So I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A on this one. So start thinking about those now. We'll leave about 10, 15 minutes toward the end. So just to kick it off, let's have everybody introduce yourselves and your programs. Brian, we'll start with you and we'll go right down the line.
Sure. Thank you for having me today. Brian Whitaker, Deputy Director of the Centers of Excellence. We're actually at 5 customer agencies right now: USDA, HUD, Office of Personnel Management, Consumer Product Safety Commission, and DoD's Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. And some of the bold work that we're doing is really collaborating with the agencies, their leadership and their employees to modernize in specific processes and their IT, their legacy IT.
Yeah, so just in a kind of encapsulate it, what's bold about the Centers of Excellence? Why is this different than what's going on? Why isn't this just another consultancy, right? Well, how is this different?
Sure. So the reason why the Centers of Excellence is different is that we're there for a very finite time, but we specifically partner with that agency's employees and their subject matter experts to create sort of some legacy planning and some sustainability. Those employees are with us from beginning to the end. They know the processes, the methodologies, and the techniques that we use to modernize, so that when we depart, they're there. They have all the legacy information and knowledge and processes, and they can continue on in identifying and prioritizing opportunities to modernize technology for citizens.
Excellent. Dan, who are you? What are you doing?
Hi, Dan Fogarty. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Division of Intramural Research in the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute of the National Institutes of Health, underneath Health and Human Services. We all have long titles. And so first, in terms of being bold, I think for those parents that are out there, I'll be a parent for the first time at the end of this month. And so that certainly is, I think, bold enough, and I'll probably stop there. In terms of the areas that we really highlighted for this event, I would say in the keynote, it was talked about identity management, which is about the outward-facing, building trusting relationships with the customers. I think what we focused a lot on is sort of that inward-facing, building trusting relationships within our area, our community, within our office, with our employees, with our staff. And so I think that's a very critical aspect in terms of any bold initiative in order to foster those ideas and actually get the momentum moving. The 2 areas that I would highlight very briefly would just be one, on the operational side, developed a application for managing our finances. We called it the Financial Application to Manage Everything, FAME. And it was something that we built. It started with just simply a Lean Six Sigma project to improve our Excel formulas, and then that led into actually developing it inside of Microsoft Dynamics 365, which is a lot of a venture, which is essentially an entirely team-focused approach, which also then requires implementation, listening, and hearing out everyone's ideas. The second piece to that was around management culture, which is around focusing on the staff and developing a much more comprehensive community between the administrative and scientific staff. The NIH is the largest biomedical research facility with lots of individuals, administrative as well as, of course, scientific. And so we spent about a year with a task force focused on really getting into the cultural piece to that and building that community, which was really unearthing a lot of interesting pieces to work on as a unit.
Excellent. Fame. Now I'm going to have Bowie in my head all day, so thank you for that. That's not so bad. Veronica.
Hi, good morning. Honored to be here with you all. So at OPM, we're in charge of helping with the President's management agenda, really driving those initiatives. And so, I'm Veronica Villalobos. I'm the Principal Deputy Associate Director for Employee Services at OPM. Employee Services is really the policy arm for everything that we try to do with agencies. We're not there to hinder, we're actually there to help. I say that because it depends on your experience with your HR folks and with OPM. A lot of times we hear OPM said, and oftentimes we didn't actually say that. So go back and do your own research. So back to what we were doing. In terms of the president's management agenda, I'm sure you all have heard the three drivers, right? IT modernization, data transparency, and people for the 21st century. Key amongst all of this, though, is people, because none of the rest of it will happen if you don't bring your team along, if you don't have that leadership mindset, if you don't have a growth mindset with it. So from an OPM perspective, what we're really trying to do is lead helping agencies think about how do we bring all of our employees on this journey when we think about IT modernization. How do we get people excited instead of afraid? How do we employ all the best behavioral science techniques to get folks thinking about what this can mean for their future and make a better future, rather than having that fear that first occurs when you hear about robotic process automation or artificial intelligence. I mean, you can't open the newspaper where you don't read something about someone losing their jobs because of these new technologies, and that's really scary for folks. To give you a sense, about 5% of federal positions look like they will be completely eliminated based on the technology that's out there. The numbers are starting to bear out, and our early research was giving us that same kind of read. But that doesn't mean these folks won't have jobs. We've been having reskilling academies. We've been working with agencies. We've got some who are already hitting it out of the park, like Federal Bureau of Investigation. As they bring in new technologies, they're including their employees. Some employees are actually coming out with promotions after getting upskilled and reskilled. So that's really the promising work we're trying to share with everybody, and that's what we're doing at OPM.
Excellent. Nagesh.
Hey, Aaron. Thank you all for coming out today this morning. I'm Nagesh Rao. I'm the director of the Business Technology Solutions team at the U.S. Small Business Administration. We're known as the BITS team, and we report up to Maria Roat, the CIO. And our team is really focused on the DevSecOps play. So we work on software application development and that nexus between smart software and smart hardware with our network operations team. And really what we're trying to do is figure out how to use software application and software development to better enhance the experience for the customer. And the customer is a 360. It's not just the federal employees, but it's the folks who come to the U.S. Small Business Administration looking for help for their small business or startup. It's for the federal partners who have Office of Small Businesses that have to rely on us for the policy guidance and programmatic directives so that we can ensure that uniformity as much as possible around a very diverse landscape. One of the big things I was thinking about as we were talking about bold yesterday is, bold is the notion of being fearless before danger, right? In front of danger. And so one of the big things I had been doing over the last couple of years when I took over the team was stopping with the sexy, cool stuff, the shiny, bright objects, and focusing on the fundamentals. And being fearless about focusing on the fundamentals and getting it done right so that even when I leave, it's sustainable and continues on with the succession plan. So that is what I've been driven on doing over the last few years, is to eradicate the stupid stuff and really focus on the smart long-term stuff.
Excellent.
I'm going to be blunt, and transparent.
That is much appreciated. So there's a lot of things I want to hit here. One of the prime ones going to be, Veronica, what you brought up about, right, not leaving people behind. And I love the diversity of agencies we have represented here, because I think we can dig into a lot of nuance there. But before we get there, let's set the stage with how to be bold. And Nagesh, you started on that, so I'm gonna go to you first. You talked about pulling back from some of the shiny objects and focusing on what really needs to get done. How are you determining where to focus your efforts, where you can be milquetoast, and where you can be bold?
That's a great question. So, what I've been doing was looking at what our agency priorities have to be. The agency mission is to support America's entrepreneurs and small businesses. So according to the census, there's around 30 million plus small business organizations that identify themselves as small business owners and entrepreneurs. And when we look at our in-person engagement, it measures up to when we make our congressional budget justification numbers, we're touching around 2.8 to 3 million small businesses, entrepreneurs per year. So there's this big gap, and we're only a 2,000 so size federal agency. So we're really tiny. So we're demanded by the House and the Senate Small Business Committees, you need to help every entrepreneur, you need to help every small business owner. And so I'm of the notion of all right, how do I use technology to augment that experience? So our in-person engagement's hitting 2.8 million, but one of our main digital assets, SBA.gov, has been hitting numbers around 14 million ever since we did the rebuild of the site to actually make it a real sustainable digital product, an augmentation of that perspective. so that when people come, they can come with a little bit more of that growth mindset, that self-learning perspective. All right, what information do I need to get? And how do I increase my SBA IQ so that when I go and talk to someone at SBA or a research partner with SBA, I actually have some fundamentals in me, and we're getting past the hello, who are you, what am I, to hey, I'm interested in government contracting, I'm interested in working with this Veterans Business Development Center, or I'm interested in SBIR funding, Small Business Research Grant Contract funding, whatever it may be. I'm trying to demystify the landscape so that people can get access from A to Z really quickly. And with minimum resources, because we don't have a hefty budget like others, SBA's budget for the year is what Department of Defense spends in 1 8-hour day, right? So we have to be really nimble, and we have to be really smart about how we focus our priorities to help America's entrepreneurs. And part of that is really just coming down to delivering expectations over and over. And when you deliver that customer expectation and customer satisfaction, those wins add up. And when you get those wins add up and that people get that drive and knowledge of like, okay, I get it, I see the pattern, let's build off on that.
Mm-hmm. Brian, I want to put the similar question to you because at the centers, you've got the 5 original centers. There's the AI center that was stood up. You're looking at working with the Jake and others. There was talk about an RPA center. There was talk about change management, about cybersecurity. Those ones haven't come up yet because I imagine there's only so many bites you can take at a time. So how are you, again, figuring out where to put your efforts so that I'm just going to keep using the term again, so that you can be bold and not just be spreading yourself so thin that you get nothing done?
Sure. I think part of that, part of being bold is really being humble and sort of validating your assumptions, right? So oftentimes we anticipate or think we know what agencies need, but actually taking the time to talk to them, the leadership, the employees, to really find out what their pain points are. I think that's really one of the big indicators as to why these other areas haven't necessarily been stood up just yet. And back to Nagish's point is getting away from like the stupid shiny stuff and really working on those fundamentals. RPA, I think, and AI are definitely very buzzwordy right now in the Beltway, but some of the things that those specific technologies rely on are very mature processes, very refined data elements and governance, right? So until you have those core fundamentals in place, it's really hard to do the other things.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Excellent. So one thing I heard from both of you was that you talked about customer experience, you talked about engagement and all that stuff. Those things to me are indicators that you're on the right path, right? If you are engaged with your stakeholders, then they're getting something out of it. Mm-hmm. Is making bold change and doing big things, is there a fundamental necessity there to be successful? Do you have to have a deliverable? Is failure something that is part of being bold? How do you manage to do all that? I just want to open that right up to the whole panel if anyone wants to jump in.
Well, I think the fundamental piece is just, you have to accept failure. I think a part of how you actually initiate a new idea and actually let it foster and grow is ensuring that IT isn't going to be the immediate solution. You have to accept the fact that you can actually we share checklists inside of our, organizations, right? And to make things work a little bit easier. But I think more importantly is actually establishing the safe environment, the place of which the ideas can start from any part of the organization, allow for that failure. It's easy to say, to just allow failure and be okay with that. But more importantly, I think is most of the room, I assume, will be a lot of leadership that exists. And I think it's also modeling the ability to fail and also acknowledging it, but also perhaps rewarding it as well in terms of you tried, you initiated. There's a lot of ways of which to do that. And I think each organization probably has to have an internal conversation to really understand what does it mean to them to actually create that sort of system, because the system is just the entire organization, not just the siloed aspects of it, and actually understanding how you connect all those pieces and break those walls down.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it too, and we're all family, right? We're govs. All right. So let's be real for a second. When you fail, oh man, that performance plan, right? That you screwed up, man. We can't trust you anymore. There's that BS. Okay, and I get that. And take it from me, I failed. I have failed in the past, but I'm still punching above my weight class. And part of it is taking the ownership for when you fail, and knowing when to pivot and knowing when to pull the plug. Well, on projects I've worked on where I've seen it kind of waffle and stuff, I will alert my superiors and say, hey, here are some issues. I think there's a concern we have to take. And then you muscle up and you get the team to reorient, and you either salvage or you let it go and move on. But you take ownership for that, and that's what I've done in the past. And for all the success I've had, I've also got a lot of failure too. But I don't let the failure bring me down or knock me out. I just say we experimented. We were experimenting to see if we can make it work. If it worked, great. If it didn't work, it's okay. Take the lessons learned and move on. And I instill that on my team all the time.
Yeah, if I can add too,
Yeah.
one thing about ownership is also sharing ownership.
Yep.
I think one of the things we do when it comes to technology, especially whoever is trying to drive it, is pushing hard and trying to go as fast as possible. And so we forget to bring all the stakeholders who can help us. And let's admit, they'll slow us down a little bit, certain ones especially, right? Sometimes HR, sometimes general counsel, sometimes your privacy officer. But when you bring them all on board and they're part of that process, and then there is a failure, because there will be, they're there with you to help you and to feel like owners in that process, as opposed to what happens when you don't bring them along and then you do fail and everyone's quick to point fingers. Well, if you'd only come here, we could have solved this much earlier.
So it's a CYA play.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, a little bit, yeah.
But the other thing I'm hearing too, I think we need to do another event, maybe in the spring. We'll call it the italics, right? Where we just we go through big failures and then break everything down. That could be fun. So, right, you've been saying very well on message about this inclusion, right? So let's get into that, because I think that's important as well. As you're doing big things, both just from the planning process, as you mentioned, bringing people on board for that, but also in the implementation, how are you ensuring that people don't get left behind? As you push government-wide, because OPM is very much a part of the automation push for things like HR, how are you ensuring that this doesn't mean people are losing jobs, people are losing skills, people are losing the value and drive of that mission? That's why so many people are in government, because they feel like they're doing something. You don't want to lose that just because you want to do a big thing, because you need those people. So how are you maintaining that inclusion?
Yeah, so this is so multifaceted. I'm amazed every time I sit down to look at it, because you think, okay, we're going to give this guidance or that, and we're going to talk with these experts. And every time you look at it, there's about 12 different dimensions to it, and you can barely see, the other side of it. What I would say, though, is you've got to include everyone early, and you have to have a clear plan. You'd be amazed at how many people actually don't have a plan on paper, haven't really thought it out. They're just like, we're going there. And then they figure everything else is going to come with it, right? So that's the first part. Second part is you have to communicate with employees and communicate often and be honest, because they'll sense anything that isn't quite accurate. As part of that process, it means allowing them to help you plan too. We developed a whole reskilling toolkit at OPM, and the idea is not that a manager is sitting in a room figuring out how each person gets reskilled or upskilled. The idea is that a whole team is sitting in a room figuring out what are our different options to make sure that we have the right skill sets on the team, that we're bringing people along, or that we're giving people correct off-ramps based on where their aptitude exists. And in most cases, what we're really finding is people are getting to do the work that they love and letting go of the work that they loathe. And so once they realize that and they're on board, you can have some real success. But even there, do you know what we see most often? People stop communicating. They go, we have a plan, we told you what's happening, and you're moving forward. And employees forget, because it's not immediately impacting them. So part of it is communicating early and being able to shift that plan on a constant basis. And then don't forget, there's all the HR roles, right? There's all the IT ramifications. There's what happens when you do fail. There's the timeline, the fact that maybe you're not even going to have the jobs later on, and you still need them to do their work. And so it's all these different factors that are going to constantly be moving, but that's why we do our jobs, right? We love it. We love the challenge.
Yeah. So I want to dig in on this topic with each of the other three of you here, because I feel like you all have kind of distinct nuances to the work you're doing and the people you need to include. So Dan, I want to start with you. As someone who works at a component agency, right, you still have to answer, your NIH is big, but you still have to answer the HHS and the secretary. And you also have a very diverse community. You have feds, you have contractors, and you have the research community that you work with. So when you're making big changes and big moves, how do you, in your unique circumstance, how are you bringing everyone in?
So I think an example of that would be, in ensuring that people are actually working on the same language and the same page. I mean, I think time is going to be the most important thing.
When you say language, are you talking like linguistics? Are you talking computer language? Are you
Well,
talking GovSpeak?
I would say all three. I mean, I think that there's going to be GovSpeak is, we have to eliminate or at least ensure we all speak the same language on that front. But I think bringing everyone to the table means you actually have to incorporate both like the leadership, but that means a lot of different things. And I think we can be quick to assume that means someone's of authority or someone that actually has a position of power, but also is a position of influence or the informal authority that individuals have. So I think it's also bringing those individuals into the start. I think it's establishing a timeline is going to be really important and ensuring people understand what that timeline is. We all work in federal government. Things, if you're in it for the long haul, it can take years before you can actually have even maybe a small change. But that small change can have a profound impact on the operations of your unit. You mentioned, NIH is 27 different institutes and centers underneath the HHS, and each of our institutes and centers has tons of different divisions, and each of those divisions have their own culture, their own institute, their own division director, their own ways of operating. And I think it's also accepting that. I mean, I think part of it is what can you do on the micro level, and then what are the things that are being sort of driven at the high level, and how do you connect the two pieces there?
It's also, as you're talking, brought two more things to mind. One being the fact that everyone who works at NIH is trying to do something bold. I think that's true across government, right? Nobody's coming in every day and thinking, I'm going to crunch my numbers today and be done with it. But I mean, you all are doing everything from trying to, genome editing to curing cancer to everything. When everyone's trying to be bold, I mean, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? How are you managing that?
I think it's fostering the energy. I mean, I think that the NIH itself, I mean, there's individuals within our particular institute. There's one, Dr. Antisto, who's nearing the end of curing sickle cell disease. And I think it's also the mission driver that I think motivates the organization. I think it's tapping into that is probably the most important thing in each of the different missions that we have. And I think, yes, there's a lot of individuals, but each one find the connections, but also let individuals grow on their own. I mean, let them have the spotlight, let them have the particular attention. I think is going to be really important. Acknowledging that is going to be essential. And learning about what it is that drives them. And I think that's really, really essential to feeding the rest of the organization's energy around being bold and trying those new ideas and seeing how they go.
As you are another one where, so you're, as you mentioned, a relatively small agency, but you're at cabinet level, so there's plenty of eyes on you all.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got lots of different customers, right? You've got the small businesses, you've got, who are all your customers? How are you managing all that?
Oh my God, it's a lot, right? So you've got the resource partners, which are organizations like Small Business Development Centers, Women Business Development Centers, Veteran Business Centers. We have our federal partners, right? So all the different federal agencies that have a mandate to do some sort of office of small business allocation, right? Because there's a small business set aside that most of them have to do. We have the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, the solopreneurs. I mean, it covers a wide gamut. And then on top of that, like I said, you've got the politics of it all. So the House and the Senate Small Business Committee members, right? Because small business is a political hot topic. I'm not going to lie. It's very much if you look at all the campaigns, every year, it's small business. How many jobs did I bring to my community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So with all that stuff going on, it's, you have to figure out how to manage expectations. And one of the biggest things I've been trying to do from an IT perspective is how do we manage expectations so that we can help serve the customers for their various needs, but also allow them to not have to be overly dependent on us, right? So when I used to run the Growth Accelerator Fund competition in my prior life at SBA, one of the accelerators had said to me, Nagesh, what's really cool about the program you're all doing is that it's not, for some maybe that $50,000 prize was a drop in the bucket, and for others it was game changing. But he said it's a step stool, right? It's a step stool. So it helps us kind of elevate our efforts forward. And when you think about it from like folks who work with the government, right? When they get a government contract or a government grant or whatnot, that's validation, right? That's validation from a seal of the golden eagle perspective, is what we would talk about it. And so what I'm trying to think about as we elevate our resources from an IT perspective to help the various customers, I'm trying to make sure that we're doing it in such a manner so that we're helping connect the dots, but more importantly, breaking down the silos. Like we have this enterprise data map, and we saw all the different suite of services and support that our programmatic offices do. And at the end of the day, it's some sort of counseling or mentoring or access to capital kind of resource. So how do I ensure that that data flow is going right across the board so that someone who might be at the middle of the path for when a small business is scaling up and growing knows, hey, you at some point years ago talked to the SBA and got some assistance here. And it looks like you did great here, and then you kind of went on your own for a bit, but now you need some assistance again. So how can we help you out here? It's that business intelligence kind of mantra that I'm been trying to push forward, so that how do we use IT services to actually do that proper business intelligence in the first place?
The means to an end, right?
Correct.
The goal isn't just deploying the system, it's what is it going to do?
And curating it.
Yeah.
Curating it, because we may not talk to a small business after we've helped them out 5 years ago for a good few years, right? And then, when they do come back to us, it's like when you call your bank up, right? Or when you, and the bank's like, oh yeah, we helped you out 2 years ago on this issue, and it looks like it's popped up again. Let's help you out.
Yeah, excellent. Brian, I'm going to come to you to wrap up this part of the conversation. I got plenty more questions, but I feel like we've got some great resource here. So right after this, I'm going to open it up to you all if you have questions. So, but I wanted to end with you on this inclusion topic, because I feel like the COEs, that is the value proposition, right? That is the bold move. So can you talk about that part of it? How does that inclusion work, and why is that effort in particular different for what you're doing?
So inclusion is key to how we work. Specifically at USDA, we actually launched a detailee program where we picked specific employees from each of their mission areas to co-lead our initiatives, the 5 initiatives: cloud adoption, IT infrastructure, data analytics, contact center, and customer experience. We actually were able to pick seven detailees. They were partnered with us for about 2 years. Their mission area is paid for them to support us, and we took them on a bunch of our projects. So, for example, in the customer experience, we were able to get farm loans status online for the first time in 2019, and we actually took that detailee with us on interviews. So we did 80+ interviews, 6 different states, to actually validate what these farmers, ranchers, and producers needed. So bringing those ideas along, those skill sets, I mean, we touched down at an agency. We don't know any of the folks there. These detailees know these people way better than we do. They know the shortcuts. They know who are the influencers, who are the formal leaders, the informal leaders, right? So just partnering and including those employees with us is extremely helpful. In addition, we often visit some of the employees to improve the employee experience, like at OPM. We work with them to modernize their mainframe that was a little bit legacy, right? And we actually visited the folks that manage that mainframe, that manage those retirement calculators, right? So it's not just the centers of excellence happening to people, it's more so we're doing it with them.
So in that, if you were to just go in and try to do it, I mean, we could say, oh, you can't do anything without talking to those stakeholders, and I think that's, I don't want to minimize that, that's very true.
Sure.
What could you have gotten done without them? If you all had just gone in and said, you all have been doing this for years and not making progress, we're going to come in, we're going to fix it for you.
Sure.
How would that have gone?
Extremely negatively. We could go into OPM, work on the retirement calculator, botch a couple of things up, and be asking them the questions as to why isn't this working. We don't have those years of expertise with that specific agency, but we do know modern techniques that we can collaborate with them on and say, hey, here's some different ideas or some ways that we could do this faster. What do you think? Would that work in this environment? Would it not? In addition, I mean, there's a lot of perception that top-down leadership is the key, and our approach is more so of the people, if that makes sense, right? So more of that humble, human-centered design, user experience approach where we understand what the leadership wants, but we want to validate that with the boots on the ground, the employees that are actually living it.
Excellent.
If
Yeah.
I can just throw a quick compliment GSA's way, that is one thing they do really well. So I don't know how many of you heard about the GSA Robotic Process Automation Community of Practice, right? But it's got 11 different focus areas. OPM with a couple of other agencies is leading the HR section and the change management. What was amazing, though, is I won't tell you who, but there's an agency who tells us all what to do. And they heard about this approach, and they said, it's really great, but isn't it going to take you longer, and might you not be able to just hire a contractor and then validate it with all the agencies involved? And I was really impressed because GSA said, no, we want this to be a process where everybody learns from it and everybody has skin in the game. They felt like they created it. And I thought that's exactly the right answer, and I tried to provide as much support, and we're still doing the community of practice. But that is the right way to do it, because everyone understands it, they created it, and it becomes their product. And that's something that GSA does really well.
Yeah, quick plug. I wrote about that 2 weeks ago, and it is exactly that. The whole idea is it's not even IT people who are coding the bots, right? It's the people doing the processes that are the ones doing the work because they understand it. If we're going to make it work, it's got to be the people really doing it. So again, I've got plenty to go. So if you all are feeling sleepy, that's fine. But if everybody's got questions, let's open it up. How are we looking here? Oh, got one up here. Let's just get a mic because we're live streaming, so we'll get you a mic coming here.
I would be interested to hear more about what you find to be the largest challenge. We want to thank everybody for coming out. But what challenges do you face that you think we could find solutions for together?
I'm going to Nostradamus right here. Budget.
So yeah, budget's definitely one of them, but I would actually say office politics.
100%.
I would say it's the office politics. It's the fiefdoms that happen. What is it? It's the fiefdoms that happen. It's the office politics, the fiefdoms, and the unwillingness to experiment and learn, right? So it's that you have to have that learner mindset or experiment and invest in your team. You know, one of the another thing, micromanaging. So the team I inherited had some bit of micromanaging happening, so I let them loose. I was like, we're not going to do that here. In fact, it's a waste of my time. The only time I micromanage is when someone's complaining to me about something, so I'll micromanage for a hot minute just to see what's happening. And then when I realize that it's not the person on my team that's at fault, but it's the other person, what I do is I document and get the receipts. And then when I get those receipts, I put it right back on them and say, we're done here. So that's what I do. I'm pretty fierce about that. I'm pretty defensive of my team. I give them all a fair shot, and it's stupid, but with the bureaucracy I have to deal with sometimes, but I do have them document because people will talk some smack, and then I go and I grab it, put it in front of them and say, you said what now? And with those receipts, they can't argue against evidence. And so that's the biggest thing is don't micromanage, don't empower, right? So you have to empower, don't disempower. And when the office politics happen, I do go and get that cup of coffee or tea with the person and figure out what's going on. Why are they so resistant on the issue? And if I can find middle ground, I find the middle ground and let it, move forward on that. But that's the thing. We're all in this together. I mean, if you're not, you either have to get on the bus together and move forward, and if you don't, that's great. But then, it's a disservice to everyone else.
And just the wonderful thing about government, why I love covering it, is because every organization, right, you're all in it together. Our
Right.
organization, we all have to work together, we're a team. But even more so, I feel like with you all, because you're all in it together for us and for yourselves too, right? You're doing this work for the people. So it really is you got to be doing this together. Let's stick on this one for a second now. Other major roadblocks and what you're doing about them.
I would say,
Go ahead. All right, I'll go. I'd say denial. I think there's a whole group of people who are denying that this transformation, this shift is occurring.
Yep.
And it's a hindrance because they're not getting ready, and it's happening not only at the employee level, but it's happening at the executive level too. And until we grow some agility, figure out as a group that we're willing to be on board, and then start working through the bureaucracy, because I think that's a secondary to that piece on denial. There is a bureaucracy. It's there for a purpose. There's a lot of rules and regulations. If we look at why they're there, they're with all good intent, and we can figure out how to use them to our benefit. But if we're in denial, we're not even going to be able to plan for it. So.
Dan, do you have one?
Yeah, I'll just go down the line with just, pessimistic and bleak outlook. I would also, I think fear, but also really getting after, what is the true, below the water, what are the actual issues that are causing things to
Yeah.
not move forward,
Yep.
and what's
Yep.
the real issue there? And I think one of the efforts we took on for about the year was working on this task force. And so one of the areas we actually spent a lot of time was actually allowing people to have the conversations and unearth the areas that are causing these walls to be put up in our own minds and causing those issues. And we actually got into the conversations of race and equity, pay, and actually allowed that to be put onto the table. And I think it enabled the team of individuals ranging in seniority, background, expertise, from scientific with medical doctors to administrative staff to those in the middle, to actually be able to have a conversation with honesty. And I think it's not easy to do. I think it's an extremely challenging thing to do, and I think we need more of that. And I'll allow the organizations to get through the politics, to allow those, those roadblocks to be dismantled, and allow our minds to actually be open to the conversations that need to occur, to allow the ideas to grow, and again, allow that failure to happen.
I'd add on to compliance first, right? So being quick to point to, hey, this document says I can't because, but what does the document not say? How does the document enable you? How do you use that document to serve the people or the citizens to further your mission? And then I'd say last but not least would be, and as feds, we probably all know this, building coalitions. There's a lot of folks that aren't necessarily open to that. They want to have that success themselves rather than like collaborating and doing something successful and bigger together. So like, for example, I think Lisa spoke earlier about the data science training that they're doing. You know, our data center of excellence engages with 5 different agencies right now. Wouldn't it be great if I could point some of those employees at that agency to the training that she's offering? So I think building those coalitions and trying to build more of those coalitions is how you overcome those challenges.
Yeah, well, one thing I heard from all 4 of you, I feel like there were 3 answers to all of these roadblocks: honesty, collaboration, and receipts. Right.
Well, so on the receipts one, I'd say, I'm sure you all dealt with the backseat driver at some point, right? The backseat driver who's like, poking and prodding and all that stuff. I have literally, stopped, pull the laptop out kind of thing, give it to them and say, okay, drive. If you know what you're doing, drive. 9 out of 10 times they back off.
Move on to, we'll take another question in a second, but I do want to hit budget for a second, because yesterday when we were talking, you had something really interesting to say about how you're managing what budget limitations you do have and, the elephant you've got to eat.
Yeah, no, and on the budget, because we have a smaller budget, what's been nice is Maria strategized about creating a working capital fund this year.
Yeah.
So, and because we have the working capital fund this year for IT projects, we were able to convert that, 1-year money into 2-year money kind of plays. And when you have budget limitations, that's where you have to work with everyone to understand, okay, what do we need? What are nice to haves? And if, we had a bigger budget than ever, what would we love to have? And you have to get those little wins to prove that the budget justification, right? One of the things we've been doing is trying to get rid of the unnecessary redundancies and the unnecessary duplication of efforts. I think that's been a big thing. That's not to say you shouldn't have redundancy, period. No, you should have a little bit of redundancy. Like our cloud strategy is a hybrid cloud strategy with both an AWS and Azure play. But with that said, it's not like I'm going to go and try to grab every cloud provider out there and have that. We have to be strategic, and we have to encourage the program offices to realize the adoption of the enterprise shared service model, right? If we're all doing the same thing at a base level, let's do the same thing at a base level. And when you do have to filter out at the top a little bit, then you filter out and spend the money appropriately there. Think about it like genus and species, right? We're all federal government at the genus level, and then the species are the different agencies. But when you break that out a little bit, a lot of the stuff we're doing is the same. So why are we doing unnecessary duplication?
To piggyback on that, I think there's a couple of areas of opportunity as well. I mean, if let's say a sub-agency is strapped for budget, why not reach out to the department level and see if that tool or product that they need, they already have a license there,
Yep.
or some other sub-agency is using it. Also, in terms of...
I was thinking, maybe they need it, right? If all of a sudden you say to the secretary, hey, we're doing this thing, it turns out they need it too, all of a sudden there's money.
Yep,
Yeah.
there you go. And then not to mention in terms of upskilling and reskilling of folks, if you have like a DC or like a Virginia library card, you get free access to like LinkedIn Learn. So if you find the right people with growth mindsets, there's free tools out there that people can use.
Excellent. We had a question over in the corner.
So I have a question. And I heard a lot of adjectives and nouns being used, so I'm going to rephrase what I thought I heard and ask my question. Change, denial, we're all in this together, being pessimistic, being optimistic, inclusivity, office politics, and people. Veronica, this question is for you. With all those adjectives and nouns all in the air, we call noise, how does OPM manage this major transition that's happening right now in your organization with this major divide?
Great question, and I think the best way to lead is to be inclusive. So I have to go back to that. I think one of the things that has made it difficult for OPM to always lead in the right direction is that we all know there's administration priorities, and then there's what the agencies think that they need, right? So I think it's trying to actually be that, that broker that assists with accomplishing both things, helping the agencies accomplish what they must do to meet their mission, while also helping direct people towards those transformational goals. And being a resource and an assist, right? So we've developed all these tools and all this guidance around this, an executive playbook for reshaping your workforce, right? Thinking about how you look at reskilling your workforce, and then thinking about how you plan within your workforce. How many of you actually have workforce plans for your area? Probably not as many as we'd like to see, right? So it will always be providing that kind of guidance. But I think the one thing agencies forget when they think about OPM is that ultimately most of the responsibility to do hiring and to develop your employees and to develop your executives and conduct performance management, that's all you. And it's how you choose to do it. And so we might be a guidance, but we can't answer every question. So I think that's really important to think about. But it will always be us listening to the agencies so that we can provide good guidance, but then the agencies listening to their employees so they can get the right answers too.
Any other questions? We have another one over here. Got a mic coming for you.
For Nagesh.
1 second. There we go. Thank
This
you.
question is for Nagesh.
Would you mind, please, though, because we're
Oh, you
streaming?
don't want me to use the mic. It will not go well.
Well, because it's online, so people can't hear you.
Terrific.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This question is for Nagesh. Picking up on Brian's point, the small business development centers could be a place where small businesses could upscale their technology. They could go find out about it, maybe even log on, maybe get a library card, because coming out of a small business, it's very difficult to look at and assess what's out there, either for a small business or for clients. So that would be something if you could leverage that.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree, and I think that's part of the overarching strategy that the agency wishes to do, is how do we amplify and leverage our research partners like SBDCs and WBCs and whatnot. I wholeheartedly agree. I know Alan Gutierrez, who's the associate administrator and runs the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, that oversee that. He's been looking at that mindset, that strategic overlay of like, how do we use our resource partners and couple it so that it's part of the process and helps augment our services so that we can actually amplify and help folks get access to the right information at the right time. It was, Eric Jones, who's chief of staff now at OPIC, he was the deputy chief of staff at SBA, and I remember a conversation we had, and he was like, Nagesh, he's a political appointee and really nice guy, and he was like, if I'm living in Palo Alto, I'm not going to need SBA. Why would I ever go to SBA? Palo Alto's flush with cash. I go, you're right, man. You're right. If I was living, and I did live in Palo Alto, I lived in Oakland as well, and I was like, I wouldn't have thought of SBA. But I also, spent time in Albany, New York, right? I've lived in, I traveled through Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and stuff like that. There are areas across the U.S. that don't have access to the flush resources that some of the mega cities do have. And that's where SBA, again, the step stool analogy, the SBA is there as a resource partner and a purveyor of information that folks may not have access to in their network. And so we're just helping democratize and helping at least level set the field a little bit better.
Yeah, excellent. So we are fast approaching the end of our time. So we'll cut it there. I'm sure you all might stick around for a bit if people have more questions. And please join me in thanking our great panel today.
All right.